Have you ever wondered why so much of our modern world still rests on ideas invented 2,000 years ago? The roads you drive, the concrete beneath your feet, even the water flowing from your tap, all of these can be traced back to the Romans. Tonight, we'll step quietly into their world and uncover the genius of their everyday hacks, the things they built not for glory, but for survival, and why so many of them still shape our lives today. So settle in, let your mind drift back through time, and if you enjoy discovering these hidden corners of history, don't forget to subscribe to Quiet Boring Sleep, where boring history becomes the perfect companion to rest. Chapter 1. The Secret Strength of Roman Concrete. When you walk across any modern city, from London to New York to Tokyo, you step across concrete without ever noticing it. Bridges, tunnels, sidewalks, dams, foundations of skyscrapers, all are built upon this seemingly unremarkable material. Yet what we so casually ignore today has a lineage that stretches back nearly 2,000 years to the Roman world, where the mastery of concrete, known as opus caementitium, transformed not only architecture, but the way humans organized and lived their lives. To truly understand the scale of this achievement, you must picture yourself in the Mediterranean basin in the centuries before Rome rose to prominence. Building was largely the art of stacking stone upon stone, cutting blocks from quarries, hauling them, and carefully fitting them into place. The Greeks, masters of proportion and beauty, built temples of marble with extraordinary precision. But such structures were limited. They required immense labor, immense cost, and the designs were constrained by the properties of stone. Span too far without support, and the roof collapsed. Build too large without reinforcement, and cracks spread. The Romans were practical above all else. They admired Greek refinement, but sought utility. Out of that mindset came their most durable innovation, mixing lime with volcanic ash, known as pozzolana, then combining it with rubble, stone, and water. The result was a gray, almost unimpressive material that could be poured into molds, hardened underwater, and most importantly, grew stronger as decades passed. While modern concrete often crumbles within a century, Roman harbors, aqueducts, and amphitheaters endure, their mixture growing denser with age. As volcanic minerals continue to crystallize within the structure, imagine the first time an ordinary Roman saw this at work. Picture a laborer in Ostia, the port of Rome, watching a new dock extend into the sea. Unlike wooden piers that rotted or stone blocks that shifted, this one solidified even as waves crashed around it. Or consider a farmer leading his mule beneath a newly built aqueduct, its arches rising not in fragile marble, but in massive spans of concrete-faced stone, carrying fresh water across miles of countryside. What the farmer likely did not know was that this quiet miracle came from the ash of volcanoes, such as Vesuvius, whose destructive power was turned into resilience by Roman ingenuity. Concrete opened possibilities never seen before. Amphitheaters could seat tens of thousands of people in carefully tiered rows. The Pantheon in Rome, with its massive dome still intact today, would have been impossible without it. Vaulted ceilings, sweeping arches, domes that appeared to float, all of these were born of concrete's flexibility. It was not beautiful in itself, so Romans faced it with brick, stone, or marble. But beneath those decorative surfaces lay the hidden strength of a material that held the empire together. This leads us to a curious reflection. The Romans did not think of their invention as remarkable in the way we do today. To them, it was a tool, just another practical solution among many. The fact that their recipe was lost for centuries after the empire's decline suggests that they themselves may not have fully realized the uniqueness of what they had created. When medieval builders sought to construct in stone, they did not inherit this Roman shortcut. The result was centuries of slower, more fragile architecture until the rediscovery of concrete in the modern age. But concrete was only the beginning. Once you could pour walls, arches, and vaults at will, Another innovation became essential: the system of roads and infrastructure that spread across the empire. And it is here that Rome's genius in blending practicality with long-term vision becomes even clearer. How, though, did the Romans combine this concrete with their equally enduring road networks? And how did this marriage of materials create a system so effective that fragments of it still lie beneath our highways today? Chapter 2. The Roman Road Network, Arteries of an Empire. If Roman concrete was the skeleton of their civilization, then their roads were the arteries. Across mountains, valleys, plains, and marshes, the Romans stitched together a network so vast and enduring that its ghostly outlines can still be traced on modern maps. They called them viae, a simple word for ways, but the scale was anything but simple. By the height of the empire, more than 250,000 miles of roads spanned their territories, of which over 50,000 miles were paved in stone. When you picture these roads, perhaps you imagine a dirt track carved through the wilderness. But Roman roads were much more than that. They were feats of engineering, designed not only for convenience, but for permanence. To stand on a stretch of the Via Appia, the Appian Way, even today, is to realize the Romans were not thinking in years or even decades, but in centuries. The process began with careful surveying. Roman engineers, called agrimensors, carried tools such as the groma, a cross-shaped staff with plumb lines used for establishing straight lines and right angles. Using this, they plotted the most direct path possible between 2 points. Unlike modern highways that curve around natural obstacles, Roman roads often went straight through them. Hills were cut through, valleys were filled, and marshes were drained. This was not laziness, but philosophy. The shortest path was most efficient, and efficiency was the Roman ideal. Once the route was established, the construction began. Workers dug a trench, sometimes as deep as several feet, depending on the terrain. Into this trench went several layers, each serving a purpose. At the bottom was a foundation of large stones, then layers of gravel, sand, or crushed rock, all tamped down firmly. On top of this went polygonal paving stones, carefully fitted together so tightly that even weeds had trouble growing between them. The road was crowned, slightly convex in the middle, to allow rainwater to drain off to the sides, where ditches carried it away. Imagine the labor. Teams of soldiers, slaves, and local workers spent weeks or months cutting and transporting stone, hauling gravel, and laying each slab. The result, however, was astonishing. These roads were not smooth in the way modern asphalt is. Traveling them in a cart could be a jarring experience, but they were durable. A properly built Roman road could last hundreds of years with minimal maintenance. In fact, many did. For Romans, the purpose of this network was first and foremost military. The legions needed to move quickly across the empire, whether to suppress a rebellion in Gaul, defend the Rhine frontier, or march to new campaigns in the east. A Roman general could order his men on the march and know that supplies, reinforcements, and messengers would not be delayed by impassable terrain. A soldier could walk 20 miles a day along these roads, boots striking stone laid centuries earlier, and arrive at his destination still within the rhythm of empire. But beyond military use, the roads became the foundation for trade and communication. Farmers carried produce from their villages to market towns. Merchants transported amphorae of wine, oil, and grain across provinces. Couriers of the cursus publicus, the official postal service, sped along with messages, stopping at relay stations called mutations to change horses and mansionese for lodging. It is said a letter could travel 50 miles in a single day. Remarkable. In a world without railroads or engines, consider what this meant for ordinary people. A farmer in northern Italy might walk alongside his donkey, loaded with sacks of olives, on a road that stretched all the way to Rome. A pilgrim might journey from Spain to Jerusalem, confident that he could follow recognizable milestones along the way. A craftsman in Gaul might see strange merchants from the east arriving in his town. Their wares carried along the same roads that his ancestors had walked generations earlier. Milestones themselves were a Roman innovation. Tall stone pillars were set at regular intervals, usually 1 Roman mile apart, inscribed with the distance to Rome or the nearest major city. They were not just markers of distance. They were symbols of authority. The emperor's name often adorned them, a quiet reminder that the order of the road, and by extension, the order of the empire, flowed from the center of power. The roads also left a cultural imprint. The very phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," reflects a real truth. The network was hub and spoke, radiating from the capital outward. In a sense, to walk the roads was to be connected, however distantly, to the life of Rome itself. Even in remote provinces, the physical touch of Roman stone underfoot was a reminder that one belonged to something larger. Yet these roads were not perfect. Travel was still slow, difficult, and often dangerous. Bandits lurked in forests, tolls were levied at bridges, and storms could wash out sections of track. But compared to what came before, they were revolutionary. In a world where a muddy path could trap carts for days, the Viae offered stability, and their durability has proven remarkable. Archaeologists in Britain, Spain, and North Africa have uncovered long stretches of Roman pavement still intact beneath. Modern roads. In some rural areas, farmers still use Roman roads for access to their fields, not even realizing the stones were laid nearly 2 millennia ago. Modern highways, including parts of Italy's road system, follow the same routes established by Roman surveyors. One could say the Roman road network was not only an achievement of engineering, but of mindset. It represented the idea that infrastructure, once built, could last indefinitely if planned well and maintained with care. But roads were not the only infrastructure that bound the empire together. Another, perhaps even more crucial, was the network that carried water into cities and towns, feeding fountains, baths, and households. The aqueducts. Just as roads moved armies and goods, aqueducts moved life itself. How then did the Romans manage to transport millions of gallons of fresh water across valleys, hills, and plains without pumps or modern machinery? And why has their system inspired engineers for centuries since? Chapter 3. The aqueduct's lifeblood of Rome. When you think of Rome, perhaps you picture soldiers in armor, or senators in white togas, or gladiators in the arena. But beneath these images lies something less dramatic, yet far more vital: water. No empire can exist without it, and no city of 1 million inhabitants, as Rome once had, can thrive unless fresh water flows in abundance. For this reason, the aqueducts of Rome and her provinces stand among the most impressive, if quietly practical, achievements of the ancient world. To appreciate their significance, imagine daily life before their construction. A family in a small village relied on a nearby stream, a well, or rainwater collected in jars. Fetching water was laborious, and supply was limited. In towns, people crowded around fountains or cisterns, waiting their turn. Disease spread easily when stagnant water became polluted. Now contrast this with Rome at its height. Multiple aqueducts carrying clean water from springs miles away, flowing constantly into public fountains, baths, latrines, gardens, and even private households of the wealthy. The city, noisy and crowded, could not have existed without them. The principle of the aqueduct was deceptively simple. Water flows downhill. Roman engineers mastered the art of maintaining a gentle, continuous gradient across long distances. Some aqueducts stretched over 50 miles, their channels dropping only a few inches per mile, ensuring steady movement without stagnation. Construction began at a spring or river source. Channels were cut into hillsides, lined with waterproof cement, made of lime and volcanic ash, then covered to protect the water from contamination. When valleys or low ground interrupted the route, the Romans built arcades, lines of graceful arches that carried the channel across the gap. The Pont du Gard in southern France, towering nearly 160 feet above the river Garden, still testifies to this genius. Its tiers of arches not only supported the channel, but displayed Roman confidence. Functional, solid, and aesthetically harmonious with the landscape. Inside the aqueducts, water flowed through stone or terracotta pipes, at times inverted siphons, carried it through lead pipes across dips in the terrain. Once the water reached the city, it was distributed through a network of conduits to reservoirs, fountains, and baths. Pressure tanks regulated flow. Large basins called castella aquae served as distribution points. From these, water trickled into hundreds of public fountains, where ordinary Romans filled their jugs or let children splash on hot afternoons. The aqueduct supported a culture deeply tied to water. Public baths, or thermae, were not luxuries but daily necessities. They provided hygiene, exercise, and social interaction. For a modest fee, any citizen could soak in hot pools, rinse in cold ones, or sit in steam rooms heated by underground furnaces. The aqueducts kept these vast complexes supplied, ensuring that warm water never ceased to flow. Latrines, too, relied on aqueduct water, flushing away waste in communal stone benches, an innovation centuries ahead of its time. Beyond the practical, aqueducts symbolized order and stability. Their steady streams represented the empire's ability to tame nature for human use. In provinces, the presence of an aqueduct reminded locals of Roman benevolence and authority. Imagine a small Gallic town where, for the first time, villagers drank from a fountain fed by distant springs instead of muddy rivers. That water was not merely refreshing. It was a message that Rome had brought civilization, but aqueducts required constant care. Teams of workers, known as curators aquarum, oversaw maintenance. They cleaned channels, patched leaks, and replaced worn pipes. Laws protected aqueducts fiercely. Tampering with them could bring severe punishment. And yet, corruption crept in. Wealthy citizens sometimes bribed officials to divert extra water into private gardens or baths. Records show disputes over illegal taps and unauthorized pipes, signs that even Rome's most brilliant system was vulnerable to human ambition. Over centuries, Rome built 11 major aqueducts, carrying water from as far as 60 miles away. Together, they supplied hundreds of millions of gallons per day. The Aqua Claudia, begun under Emperor Caligula and completed under Claudius in 52 CE, stretched over 40 miles, much of it on soaring arches. Portions of its structure still stand outside Rome, crumbling yet proud. To walk beneath them today is to feel the weight of an achievement that blended simple physics with relentless determination. Yet as with concrete and roads, the fate of aqueducts reminds us of fragility. When the empire weakened, maintenance declined. Invasions cut channels. Without skilled workers to repair them, many fell silent. Medieval Rome shrank to a fraction of its former size, its people drawing water once more from wells and the polluted Tiber. The grandeur of constant flowing fountains was reduced to memory. Only with the Renaissance and modern engineering did aqueducts revive, inspired by Roman models. And so we must ask, what lesson lies in these silent arches and forgotten channels? Perhaps it is that infrastructure, concrete walls, paved roads, flowing water, is the invisible skeleton of civilization. Empires rise and fall, rulers change, armies march and retreat, but it is the dull, unglamorous systems of supply and connection that determine how long societies endure. Today, when you turn on a faucet, drive down a highway, or cross a bridge, you reenact, without knowing it, a Roman experience. You trust that the water will flow, that the road will hold, that the structure will stand. It is a trust born 2 millennia ago in the minds of practical engineers who valued endurance over spectacle. And here lies the unresolved thought. In our modern world, where many of our systems crumble within decades and must be rebuilt, have we lost something the Romans quietly understood about durability and foresight? And that brings us to the end of our journey through the quiet genius of the Romans, builders of concrete walls, endless roads, and flowing water that still echo in our lives today. Thank you for letting me share this slow and steady history with you. If you found comfort in these stories, or if they helped you drift a little closer to sleep, I'd be grateful if you gave this video a like and subscribe to Quiet Boring Sleep. That way, whenever you need a calm voice and a gentle story from the past, you'll always know where to find it. Until next time, rest well and sleep peacefully.